The chandeliers burned bright as champagne flowed and laughter filled the ballroom. The kind of laughter that feeds on humiliation, not joy. Victoria Langston raised her glass, smiling as she pointed across the room. "Tonight," she said lightly, "I brought my driver." Laughter exploded. Phones came out. A poor man in a borrowed suit stood alone among millionaires, invited not as a guest but as a joke. Marcus Hale didn't react. He didn't argue. He didn't lower his eyes. He simply stepped forward, calm and unreadable. What no one in that room knew was this. The man they mocked once built the company that made them rich. The driver they laughed at was the name erased from their contracts. And the microphone waiting on that stage wasn't for a joke, because some men don't respond to humiliation with anger. They respond with timing, with truth, and with a revenge so clean it destroys everything. So tell me, what would you do if the people laughing at you had no idea you were about to take it all back? The city was dressed for wealth that night, the kind that does not apologize for itself. Glass towers reflected soft gold light, and black cars slid along the streets like quiet predators. Inside one of those cars sat Marcus Hale, hands steady on the steering wheel, eyes forward, posture perfect. He wore a simple black driver's uniform, pressed and clean, though the fabric was thinning at the elbows. He had worn it for years, long enough for people to forget he was anything more than the man who opened doors. In the back seat, Victoria Langston scrolled through her phone with careless grace. She was famous for it. Her ease, her confidence, the way money seemed to obey her. She was a real estate mogul, a socialite, and the headline sponsor of the Langston Foundation Charity Gala, the most exclusive event in the city. Senators would attend, CEOs, old money and louder new money. It was invitation only, and the invitations were weapons. Being included meant something. Being excluded meant everything. Marcus stopped the car smoothly at a red light. Victoria looked up, her lips curving into a smile that was not kind. "Marcus," she said, as if she had just thought of him. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, voice calm, respectful, carefully neutral. She studied him in the rearview mirror. His face was composed, handsome in a quiet way, though age and restraint had carved lines around his eyes. He looked like a man who listened more than he spoke. She liked that. Silence made people easier to shape. "You know the gala is tonight," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She laughed softly. "You always sound like you're waiting for permission to breathe." Marcus did not respond. The light turned green. He drove on. Victoria leaned back, thinking. The gala planning had been exhausting, and she was bored. Boredom for her was dangerous. It made her playful in ways that hurt other people. Earlier that afternoon, over champagne in her penthouse, one of her friends had joked about the invisible help, the drivers and assistants who hovered around their lives like furniture. Someone had laughed and said, "Imagine one of them at the gala." The table had erupted in laughter. Victoria's mind returned to that moment. She cleared her throat. "Marcus, how long have you worked for me?" 7 years, ma'am." 7 years, she repeated, impressed by the number, not the loyalty behind it. "You've been very dependable." "Thank you." She smiled again, sharper this time. "Tell me something. Have you ever been to a charity gala?" Marcus hesitated just slightly. "No, ma'am." "Well," she said, tapping her phone, "there's a first time for everything." He glanced at her in the mirror, unsure he had heard correctly. "I'm inviting you," she continued, "tonight, as my guest." The car seemed to tighten around them. Marcus felt it in his chest, a pressure he had not allowed himself to feel in years. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I'll be working tonight." "Oh, don't be dull," she replied. "That's the point. You won't be working. You'll attend." There it was, the edge beneath the silk. "I don't think that would be appropriate," Marcus said. Victoria laughed openly now. "Appropriate?" She waved a hand. "Relax, it's charity. It'll be fun. You'll get to see how the other half lives." He knew then, not fully but enough. He had seen this smile before in different faces in different rooms. It was the smile people wore when they believed they were untouchable. "If you insist, ma'am," he said. "Oh, I do," she replied. "I'll have my assistant send you an invitation." "Black tie, Marcus." "Don't embarrass me." The word hung in the air. "Yes, ma'am." She returned to her phone, already bored again. The car pulled up to her building and Marcus stepped out to open her door. She did not thank him. She rarely did. As she walked away, she added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and don't worry. We'll make sure everyone knows you're my driver. Wouldn't want any confusion." Marcus closed the door gently. His reflection stared back at him from the tinted glass. For a moment, his mask slipped. Not anger, not fear. Something older. He swallowed it down and returned to the driver's seat. That evening, alone in his modest apartment, Marcus placed the invitation on the table and stared at it. Heavy paper. Gold lettering. His name printed clearly, without a title, without context. Just Marcus Hale. He opened his closet. Inside were 2 suits. One for funerals. One for interviews he never got. He chose the darker one and laid it on the bed. Then he sat down and allowed himself a long breath. Outside, the city prepared for celebration. Inside, Marcus prepared for something else entirely. The Langston Grand Ballroom rose like a monument to excess. Its white marble steps, glowing beneath towering lights that washed the night in artificial daylight. Valets moved with rehearsed precision, guiding luxury cars into place as guests emerged wrapped in silk, diamonds, and entitlement. Laughter floated through the air, light and careless. The sound of people who had never feared a locked door or an empty account. Inside, crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished floors, and an orchestra played softly, just loud enough to remind everyone that this moment was curated for them. Marcus stepped out of a modest rideshare 2 blocks away. He adjusted his jacket slowly, smoothing the sleeves, checking the cuffs. The suit fit well enough, though it carried the faint stiffness of something rarely worn. His shoes were clean, shined by hand an hour earlier. He stood still for a moment, letting the noise and light settle around him, then began walking toward the entrance. Each step felt measured, not from fear but from control. At the bottom of the steps, a security attendant glanced at him, eyes scanning instinctively for signs of belonging. Marcus handed over the invitation without a word. The man studied it, then looked up, confused. "You're a guest?" the attendant asked. "Yes," Marcus replied calmly. The attendant hesitated, then nodded and stepped aside. Marcus ascended the steps without hurry, passing beneath the lights and into the building as if he had done it 1,000 times before. Inside, the room shifted. Conversations did not stop, but they bent, warped slightly as eyes followed him. He did not belong to their mental catalog of guests. He was not loud enough, not decorated enough. He carried himself with an ease that unsettled them. Not confidence exactly, something quieter, something earned. Victoria Langston stood near the center of the room, surrounded by admirers. She wore a silver gown that caught the light with every movement, and her smile was wide, rehearsed, perfect. She was laughing at something a hedge fund manager had said when she noticed the change in attention. Her eyes landed on Marcus. For a split second, she froze. Then amusement bloomed across her face like a slow sunrise. "Oh my God," she said loudly, her hand flying to her chest. He actually came. Her circle turned to look. "That's your driver?" someone asked, squinting. "Yes," Victoria replied, her voice rich with delight. "Marcus, isn't he adorable?" Marcus continued walking. He felt the room observing him, weighing him, deciding where he fit. He did not look at Victoria yet. Instead, he took in the space. The faces, the exits, the cameras positioned strategically along the walls. His eyes moved with purpose, though no one noticed. They were too busy laughing. A woman in red leaned toward Victoria. "This is bold even for you." Victoria shrugged. "Relax, it's charity. Besides, I thought it would be educational." For him, Marcus stopped a few feet away. He met Victoria's eyes for the first time that evening. He inclined his head politely. "Good evening, ma'am," he said. The hedge fund manager laughed. "Ma'am, that's priceless." Victoria stepped forward, looping her arm through Marcus's as if he were a novelty item. "Everyone, this is Marcus. He's been driving me for years. Isn't it wonderful what opportunities charity creates?" She squeezed his arm, just hard enough to remind him who she thought she was. Marcus smiled. Not a forced smile. Not a bitter one. A small, controlled curve of the lips that did not reach his eyes. "It's a beautiful event," he said. "You've done well." The words were simple, neutral. But something in the way he said them made Victoria pause. Only for a heartbeat. Then she laughed again. "Oh, Marcus," she said. "Go get a drink. Try not to wander into places you shouldn't." A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. Marcus took a glass, nodding his thanks. As he turned away, the whispers began. Is this some kind of social experiment? Does he even know how much those plates cost? This is so on-brand for her. Marcus moved through the room slowly, listening. Every word landed, but none pierced. He had learned long ago that people revealed more when they believed you were beneath them. Tonight they were generous. He stopped near the edge of the ballroom, standing beside a marble column. From there he could see everything. The stage at the front, the large screen behind it, currently displaying the Langston Foundation logo, the sound booth, the donors clustered closest to power, the exits. A man in a tailored suit approached him, curiosity overcoming caution. So, the man said, sipping his drink, how does it feel being the help in a room like this? Marcus considered the question. It feels familiar, he replied. The man laughed, missing the meaning entirely. You must be enjoying the food at least. That's caviar. Yes, Marcus said softly. I recognize it. The orchestra shifted into a new piece. Victoria moved toward the stage as the event coordinator whispered in her ear. It was almost time for the opening address. The night's first applause. Marcus checked his watch. Everything was on schedule. Victoria glanced back at him once more, her eyes bright with anticipation. She was proud of herself, proud of the joke, proud of the room that obeyed her. She did not notice the technician slipping a small flash drive into the sound booth computer. She did not notice Marcus lift his glass in a quiet, private toast. And she did not notice that the room, slowly and subtly, was no longer hers. The lights dimmed with practiced precision, softening the room into a hush that felt expensive. Conversations tapered off as guests turned their attention toward the stage. Champagne flutes still in hand, faces angled upward with polite interest. The orchestra faded into silence, and the Langston Foundation logo glowed behind the podium, large and unquestioned. This was the moment Victoria Langston lived for. The controlled pause before admiration. She stepped onto the stage as applause rose on cue. Victoria waited, smiling, soaking it in. She knew how to hold a room, how to let silence stretch just long enough to feel important. When the clapping died down, she leaned into the microphone. Good evening, she said warmly. Thank you all for being here tonight to support a cause that means so much to me. The screen behind her shifted, displaying images of smiling children, renovated buildings, hopeful slogans. The audience nodded, satisfied by the performance of generosity. Victoria spoke smoothly, thanking donors by name, sprinkling humor where it was safe, humility where it was expected. She was excellent at this. Every word landed exactly where she wanted it to. She spoke of opportunity, of second chances, of lifting others up. The irony moved unnoticed through the room like a ghost. At the edge of the ballroom, Marcus stood still. His posture had not changed, but something in his eyes had sharpened. He watched Victoria as if she were a piece in motion, predictable and fragile. When she reached the end of her prepared remarks, she smiled wider. And tonight, she continued, I want to do something a little different, a little reminder of why we're here. She gestured toward the audience. Many of us forget how fortunate we are. We forget how easily circumstances could have been different. A few people chuckled knowingly. So, Victoria said, turning slightly, I decided to invite someone special tonight. Someone who represents the very people we aim to help. The room stirred with interest. Victoria scanned the crowd theatrically, then pointed. Marcus, would you come up here? A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Heads turned. Phones lifted discreetly. Marcus did not react immediately. He took one final sip of his drink, set the glass down carefully on a passing tray, and began walking. Each step toward the stage was unhurried. The laughter followed him, light and indulgent, as if everyone were in on the joke. When he reached the stairs, Victoria extended a hand, helping him up as though he were a child. Let's give Marcus a hand, she said brightly. The applause was thin, amused. Marcus stood beside her at the podium. Under the lights, his face was clear, composed, unreadable. Victoria leaned toward him, lowering her voice but keeping her smile. Just say hello, she whispered. Tell them how grateful you are. Marcus looked at the microphone, then at her. May I? He asked calmly. Victoria laughed. Of course. She stepped aside. Marcus adjusted the microphone slightly, just enough to bring it closer. The room quieted, curiosity replacing humor. He waited until the silence was complete, until even the clink of glasses had stopped. Good evening, he said. His voice carried easily, steady and warm, without strain. It was not the voice of a man nervous to speak. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being heard. My name is Marcus Hale, he continued, and I want to thank Victoria for inviting me tonight. Victoria smiled, satisfied. I've spent many years driving people to rooms like this, Marcus said, listening to conversations about money, power, and generosity. Tonight I was invited inside. A few guests shifted in their seats. The tone was not what they expected. You see, Marcus went on, this foundation celebrates second chances, redemption, the idea that people can fall and rise again. The screen behind him flickered. The Langston Foundation logo vanished, replaced by a photograph. It showed a younger Marcus standing in a sleek office surrounded by men in suits. The room reacted instantly, confusion rippling outward. Victoria's smile faltered. Marcus did not turn around. He knew what was there. 20 years ago, he said, I founded a company, a logistics firm that specialized in private infrastructure contracts. We grew fast, faster than anyone expected. The screen changed again. Headlines appeared. Stock numbers. A familiar corporate name, now owned by a conglomerate. Several guests in the room had investments in. Murmurs grew louder. That company was taken from me, Marcus said evenly. Through forged signatures, quiet deals, legal maneuvers executed by people who understood that power protects itself. Victoria's face drained of color. She leaned toward the event coordinator, whispering urgently, but it was too late. The technicians were frozen, eyes wide, hands nowhere near the controls. I was offered a choice, Marcus continued. Disappear quietly or be destroyed publicly. I chose silence. The room was no longer laughing. I became invisible, he said, which, as it turns out, is the perfect place to observe. Victoria stepped forward. This is highly inappropriate, she said, her voice tight. Marcus turned to her then, his expression calm. So was the joke, he replied. Gasps spread through the audience. He faced the crowd again. Tonight isn't about humiliation. It's about truth. The screen shifted once more. Documents appeared. Court filings, names, familiar names. And truth, Marcus said, has a way of arriving when invited. The ballroom no longer felt like a place of celebration. The chandeliers still glowed. The flowers remained perfectly arranged. But the air had thickened, heavy with disbelief and sudden fear. People leaned forward in their seats, no longer sipping champagne, no longer whispering for amusement, but murmuring with urgency. Phones that had been raised for mockery now recorded in desperation, their lenses fixed on the stage as if proof itself might disappear. Victoria stood frozen beside Marcus, her carefully constructed composure cracking in visible layers. Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if the correct response might materialize if she waited long enough. It did not. Marcus gestured. Or verified records, transaction trails, internal emails, signed agreements. The screen shifted again, this time displaying highlighted sections, dates, signatures enlarged for clarity. A few names in the audience stiffened. One man near the front dropped his glass. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound sharp and out of place. I spent years collecting this information, Marcus continued. Not in anger. In preparation. Victoria finally found her voice. This event is not the place for this, she said, louder now, turning toward the crowd as if seeking support. This is a charity gala. Security? No, Marcus said softly. The word stopped her. She turned to him, eyes wide, unaccustomed to being interrupted, especially by someone she believed existed beneath her. This, Marcus continued, is exactly the place. He looked out at the audience, meeting their eyes one by one. His gaze did not accuse. It invited recognition. For years I was told to be patient, to accept what I lost as the cost of doing business. I was told men like you, he said, nodding toward a cluster of executives, never face consequences. That exposure only hurts the people without protection. The screen changed again. Livestock tickers appeared. Several company names flashed red. A murmur swelled into a low roar as people checked their phones. Refreshing feeds, watching numbers drop in real time. The room shifted physically now. Bodies leaning, chairs scraping. This was no longer a story. It was happening. Earlier today, Marcus said, my legal team filed multiple motions across 3 jurisdictions, federal and state. Those filings became public record 6 minutes ago. Victoria staggered back a step. You used my event, she said, her voice shaking, to stage this. Marcus turned to her fully. His expression was not cruel. It was clear. I used your invitation, he replied. You provided the audience. The platform. The proof of character. Her breath came faster. You were my driver, she whispered. For 7 years, Marcus said. I drove you to meetings where my former company's assets were discussed. I parked outside buildings I once owned. I listened while you praised men who dismantled my life. He paused, letting that land. And you never recognized me, he continued. Not because I changed, but because you stopped seeing people like me as people. Security finally moved toward the stage, uncertain, hesitant. One guard slowed when Marcus looked at him and shook his head slightly. Don't, Marcus said. This is a legal disclosure, not a disturbance. The guard stopped, unsure, then stepped back. The screen now displayed a familiar face. Victoria's face, younger, smiling, standing beside one of the men Marcus had referenced earlier. Gasps filled the room. That photograph, Marcus said, was taken the night my company was acquired under false pretenses. Victoria Langston was not an observer. She was a beneficiary. Victoria screamed out, "That's a lie!" The screen changed again. A contract appeared. Her name highlighted. Her signature unmistakable. The room erupted. People stood shouting questions, accusations, demands. Reporters, embedded discreetly among the guests, pushed forward. Phones held high, eyes gleaming. The orchestra remained frozen. Instruments abandoned, their presence now absurd. Victoria's knees buckled. She gripped the podium to steady herself. You ruined me, she said hoarsely, no longer performing. Marcus leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. No, he said. You revealed yourself. He straightened and addressed the room one final time. I did not come here for applause, he said. I came for accountability. Behind him, the screen displayed a final message. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Victoria's world collapsed in silence. The ballroom emptied in stages, not all at once, but in waves of disbelief and quiet panic. Conversations fractured into hushed clusters as guests moved toward exits. With the same urgency they once reserved for red carpets, the chandeliers still burned overhead, indifferent to the unraveling below them, while abandoned champagne flutes lined the tables like evidence of a life interrupted. Outside, police lights washed the marble steps in red and blue, their reflection cutting through the gold glow of the night. Victoria Langston remained on the stage. She had not been arrested yet. Not publicly. That would come later, handled carefully, wrapped in procedure and press releases. For now, she stood alone beneath the lights, her silver gown dulled by sweat and shock, her face stripped of confidence. The applause she had expected never arrived. Instead, she listened as her empire dissolved in murmurs and phone calls she could not hear. Marcus stepped down from the stage without ceremony. No one stopped him. Security watched but did not move. Reporters noticed him but hesitated, unsure whether to pursue the man who had just detonated the room. He walked through the ballroom at the same steady pace he had used all evening, passing tables where powerful people avoided his gaze. Some looked ashamed, others looked angry, a few looked afraid. At the entrance, he paused. For a moment, he turned back and looked at Victoria. She met his eyes, searching for something, mercy perhaps, or explanation. Marcus gave her neither. He nodded once, not in triumph, but in closure. Outside, the night air felt clean. Marcus descended the steps and walked past the police line without interference. An officer glanced at him, then at his phone, recognizing the name now trending everywhere. The officer stepped aside. A black sedan waited across the street. Not his. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Inside, a woman sat with a tablet in her lap, her expression focused, professional. Mr. Hale, she said, your press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Legal counsel will meet you at 9. Federal investigators have requested a preliminary statement. Marcus nodded. Thank you. He did not get in immediately. Instead, he looked back once more at the building. The Langston name still hung above the entrance, lit and proud. It would not last the week. Marcus entered the car. As it pulled away, notifications flooded every screen in the city. News outlets ran the story under urgent banners. Social media dissected the footage frame by frame. Former allies released statements of shock and denial. Stock markets reacted brutally. Boards convened emergency meetings. Quiet partners began calling lawyers. And in a small apartment across town, a man sat alone at a kitchen table, watching the coverage replay on a muted television. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest had lifted. Not because he had won, but because he had spoken. The car stopped at a red light. Marcus looked out the window at the city he had once built and then lost. It looked different now. Not kinder, just honest. The woman beside him broke the silence. "Do you regret working for her?" Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "It showed me who people really are when they think they're safe." The light turned green. The car moved forward. Behind them, the gala venue stood hollow and bright, a monument to arrogance and miscalculation. Inside, Victoria Langston sat alone as lawyers surrounded her, their words blending into noise. The world she had ruled no longer recognized her authority. She had invited a joke and received a reckoning. Title: a rich woman mocked her poor driver, but when he arrived, everyone was stunned. Description: she invited him as a joke, to humiliate him in front of the city's richest and most powerful. But the moment Marcus Hale walked into the gala, jaws dropped. What the crowd didn't know was that this poor driver once built the very empire they celebrated, and his revenge was merciless. From shock to awe, this story is about patience, timing, and the ultimate power of truth. Will Victoria Langston recover from the humiliation, or has she met the man who was destined to reclaim everything she stole?